do me a favor and turn in your Bibles to Hebrews chapter 2. All right. Got everything moved around up here. First, I want to thank all of the women in this church. You may not be a mother, but most of you are incredibly motherly to me. And I want to thank you for all of that that you guys have spoken and done and served and sacrificed for this church, for others in your life. We do want to thank you for all of that. I realized ever since I have been in ministry preaching, I have had the joy of speaking on Mother's Day every year. Because when I was under Pastor Charlie, he didn't like speaking on Mother's Day. He called it the one day a year that it's a trap, because you can't do it well. You either, gush over moms and those who are struggling or who have lost their mothers that year or recently or struggling. It becomes a very hard and difficult thing. And so he was like, you're just really good at it, so you keep doing this. So I realized I ran out of Mother's Day messages back in the 90s, So, no, we're going to continue on with our Hebrews study. And as we're going through this, I need to remind you, because it was 3 weeks ago when we started, and so we did basically chapter 1 in those 2 weeks. And what I want you guys to remember is why the book of Hebrews is written. The book of Hebrews is written because there are a large number of people who are falling away from the faith, who are leaving the church, because there is all kinds of persecution going on. It is a very difficult time in the church. If you were known as a Christian, people would not do business with you. Your businesses would struggle and they would fold. You could be arrested. You could be persecuted. It was the whole gamut of persecution. So it was a very difficult time. And so people were going back to the things that they knew, back to Judaism especially, back to being Jewish and following the law and all of those things. That's what they went back to. And the writer of Hebrews is saying, listen, you can't go back. Where else are you going to go? And so he starts off the book of Hebrews with saying, okay, it's not just a religion, that Jesus has come and he has spoken to us. And what he has spoken is God's complete and final word. So where else are you going to go to listen? And so today we're going to talk about the next part. So he says, okay, you can, if you try to walk away from Jesus, where else are you going to find the truth? Is really what it boils down to. That's what chapter 1 is really all about. Where else are you going to go to find really what is reality and true? Jesus is the final word. He came and gave us everything we needed for life and godliness. He gave us all that we needed. So we need to cling to his word. So that's how chapter 2 opened up. And we read that last time we were together going through Hebrews. But it says this. Chapter 2, verse 1 says, we must pay the most careful attention, therefore, to what we have heard, so that we do not drift away. And so he's talking about being these group of people that are starting to drift away from the faith. They begin to drift. That describes it incredibly well. A lot of times, if you are not paying attention to something, it can fall apart very easily. For Mother's Day, we cleaned the yard. It's a lot easier with my crew because we have so many kids, so it's a lot easier. But I was sitting there remarkably, just in awe of the weeds that grow in a garden. We do this basically once a year, and we pull out everything so Jenna can get new flowers. And I look at this thing, and I'm like, why in the world are there so many weeds in this garden? How did so many weeds get in here? Well, it's because if you don't pay careful attention, they grow. And I mean, some of them, I constantly asking Ellie, is this a flower? Is this, because it's huge, so it must be something that Jenna planted. No, the huge ones usually are the weeds. So that I found out the hard way. So as we were pulling them out, I'm beginning to realize you have to pay very careful attention, because what you do not pay attention to begins to erode. And so what the writer of Hebrews is saying is, listen, if we're going to do something, pay attention. Be intentional about what you are doing. So my first challenge today is that I ask that you start thinking about how intentional you are in your life. How intentional are you about life? We have to have this Mother's Day because we take mothers for granted. We would go about every other day as if it's Kids' Day, like we've done for generations and every day, the rest of the day of the year. But we have to stop and we have to be intentional on Mother's Day to tell our mothers that we love them. Shouldn't we have done that all year long? Yes. And so what we do on Mother's Day is we end up trying to pick the weeds out of our relationship with our mom. Right? Oh, you know what? I've let this go. I just want to let you know how grateful I am. And you start listing things that started last Mother's Day. Oh, you know, after Mother's Day, we went and did this and really enjoyed this. And what you've done here, thank you. And I want to thank you for this. And we have this mentality that we can just put our lives on autopilot and not be intentional. Anything that you are not being intentional about will fall apart. Let me use one more example, just because I am so ridiculously impressed. We have a student in here that ran a mile in under 5 minutes. I'm not sure if my car can do that. But I remember I used to run, and not on purpose all the time, but I would run. I never got to a spot where I could do a 5-minute mile, but I remember the time where I was just in shape and could not get tired. I was constantly playing a sport. I was constantly doing something. I was always moving, and it was intentional. I was always doing something, and I kept in good shape. Last Monday, we started softball. I got to first base, and I could not breathe. I didn't run real fast. The next morning, I woke up, and I could not move my leg. Because the things that we do not pay attention to begin to wither. We cannot live our lives on autopilot. We need to be intentional. And if you think your relationship with anyone will grow if you don't pay attention to it, you're wrong. It will wither. As will your relationship with God. And so he says, I've got to read the exact words because the translation is actually very accurate. We must pay the most careful attention. It's all one word in Greek. But the idea is that you have to pay the most careful attention. Like, not just pay attention, not just pay careful attention. No, you have to pay the most careful attention. It seems a little dramatic as he's saying it, but it's not. All he's saying is you have to be intentional. Be intentional. So this morning, I hope you push the reset button on your intentionality. All right, we can go home. Right? We're good. No, it continues. And so let's keep going. The next part that jumped out at me, I'm going to read this part real fast. So he says, you must pay the most careful attention, therefore, to what we have heard. Remember, because Jesus is the final word, we're not going to try to find it somewhere else. We have to pay attention to him because we don't want to drift away. For since the message spoken through the angels was binding, and every violation and disobedience received its just punishment, how shall we escape if we ignore such a great salvation? So what he is doing here is he's saying, listen, the angels sent the Old Testament, the law. They spoke to the prophets. That's how they got the message. but Jesus has come. You pay very close attention to the message that the angels gave. How much more should you pay attention to the one who brings the final, full, complete word? So he's saying that. But I love how he puts that end of it. How shall we, I got to keep putting my glasses, sorry. How shall we escape if we ignore such a great salvation? So he's sitting here, you've got to be intentional, and that's all well and good. I can stay here and tell you, hey, be intentional, and you're all like, you know what, that's a great message. And we could have left it at that, and you would have walked out of here and said, okay, I'm working on pushing the reset. But why? You have to want to. To be intentional about something, you have to want to. You can't just be intentional about something you don't really care about. Because how long will that last? Not very long. Not very long at all. So you have to be intentional, and there has to be a part of this that says, this is what I want. And so he goes after it and says, well, how else are we going to escape if we ignore such a great salvation? So he is putting out there how great the salvation that we have. He's reminding them the salvation that we have is incredible. But he uses this word ignore to take for granted or to forget about, to put aside this great salvation. So he's saying this is why you're not paying close attention, is because you're not paying attention to the salvation that you have been given. Now here comes our hard part. How many of you honestly feel like you need to be saved from something? Yeah, some of the hands are like, yeah, okay. They're like, okay, the pastor, well, no, really what is my question is, do you live your life as if you cannot survive without something that you really need? That's where we run into a problem. We spend most of our lives trying to make sure that we don't need anything. We spend most of our lives and most of our time trying to become self-sufficient so that we need nothing. So that we don't need saving. But that's our culture today. That's where we live. We live in a place that is incredibly comfortable. We live in a place that is incredibly safe. We live in a place that gives us most everything that we need. Granted, when we stop and we look at it, we never have enough. But we have more than we need. And here he is talking to a group of people who are literally fearing for their lives, who have spread out all over the known earth because they have been chased down. If you're part of our Acts study on Wednesday, remember Paul went to the ends of the earth to find the Christians that had escaped Jerusalem, and he was going to arrest them and bring them back with him. He was going to have a march of Christianity back to Jerusalem to persecute these people. That's terrifying. He would go door to door to find out who's a Christian and drag men and women away to be arrested. If I came and knocked on your door, most of you are not hiding. Some of you, because it's me. But most people will come to the door not afraid that somebody is coming to take you away because of what you believe. And so we have become very content, and we have this mentality of, okay, yes, I need a Savior on paper. But in reality, I don't feel it day to day. I don't see it day to day. So it's not all that important to me, so why be so intentional about it? So the weeds begin to grow on our relationship. And he's sitting here explaining to them, no, you have such a great salvation. We can't ignore it. Where else are we going to go? How are we going to escape if we don't stand on such a great salvation? So he talked about that Jesus has the incredible truth. Where else are we going to go? And then he comes and says, well, where else are you going to go for salvation? He says, this is the great salvation. And we all sit there and we're like, okay, we can walk away with that because theoretically I understand this. Now he's going to try to drive the point home. So listen to what he does. This is where he goes on. Look at verse 5. This is where our message actually begins. That was all to set it up. It is not to the angels that he subjected the world to come, about which we are speaking. Most people are like, well, he just completely changed topic. He didn't. He's explaining the great salvation. He's explaining what things were supposed to be and how they are now. And so he stops and he says, okay, this is the great salvation. He's saying this is where we're at. God did not subject the angels. And we're all like, why is he back to picking on the angels? He did not subject this world to the angels. Let me reword it so it makes a little bit more sense. But what he is saying is that God did not give this world to be run and to be ruled over by angels. He didn't make this world to have the angels have dominion over the world. The angels are not the ones who are supposed to be the ones who have dominion over all of the earth. And he leaves that kind of open, like, okay, well, if the angels don't have it, then who does? Now he goes back to what they do know, and he goes back to a verse in Psalms, and he quotes it. And I love how he sets it up. He's like, but there is a place where somebody testified. He said, somebody wrote somewhere this. Now, everybody he's writing to knows where and who wrote it. But he's sitting there like, okay, what is man that you are mindful of them? The Son of Man that you care for him. You made them little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor and put everything under their feet. Now let me teach you a little thing. We've done this a couple times. Do you have a little letter after feet? After that little section? You have a little tiny letter that we always skip over. That was not put in there by the original author. That is just a help for you. Look at that little letter and then go to the bottom of your page, or if you have a center column, the bottom of my page, I have a B and a C, and it says verses 6 through 8 are Psalms 8, 4 through 6. It's just a help for me to know what he is quoting. And what he is quoting is Psalm 8. And he quotes it, so we don't have to go and look that back up. But if you do, you get to see how much this author is talking about what God did in the beginning. How God created man. He created man in his own image. He created man in his own image and gave him rule and authority over the entire creation. That is amazing. That is incredible. And he's sitting here saying, this is what you are. You are not just this creature, but you are created by God intentionally, given his image. You are an image bearer of God. And you are his representative authority here on the earth. So he says, what is man that you are mindful of him? You created him. We're not all that special, except God put our worth in us. And he said, no, this is what you're worth. He made us a little lower than the angels. He's not saying he made us a little higher than the animals. No, he's saying you made us a little lower than the angels. Like, how important are we here on earth? And this is the psalmist writing, and he's saying, what is man that you are mindful of him? That you put him in a place that's a little lower than the angels. And you put everything under his feet. In other words, everything. And if you keep reading, it talks about the oxen, it talks about the birds of the air, it talks about the fish of the sea. all of that is what we have authority over. That this world, that the creation was here for us to rule and enjoy. Now, watch what he does. Because I know you're sitting there saying, okay, that's awesome, but the waves don't listen to me. Right? The rain definitely doesn't. The thunderstorms, they really don't. Those tornadoes and hurricanes that come, they don't have ears. They're not obeying anything I'm saying. But this is what he says. In putting everything under them, God left nothing that is not subject to them. Yet at present, we do not see everything subject to them. Okay, let me put a disclaimer out there. You have little letters next to them, every one of the thems, if you're using an NIV. If you have a translation, it may say him. The word can be translated either them or him. But what the Hebrew author is talking about is the same thing that the author of Psalms was talking about. What is man that you are mindful of him, that you gave him all of this power and authority? What is man that you are mindful of him? And so he says everything has been given to us. Everything. There is not anything that he is withhold from us. That everything is subject to us. Yet at present, we do not see everything subject to us. Right? Does it look like how it was supposed to be? Is everything in creation subject to us? Can I talk to my cancer and it go away? Can I be like, no? Can I talk to the thorns that are in my yard and tell them to get out without having to rip them out? No. So something is off, is what the writer of Hebrews is saying. He's saying we don't see that right now because sin has come into the world and it has messed up the order. We gave up that authority. This is how it was supposed to be. When God created, he gave us dominion over the earth so we could reflect him in how we ruled and lived over this earth. And we had power and authority over those things, and we handed it away. And so, right now, it doesn't seem like Psalm 8 is anything that we get. Psalm 8 is a promise that we have. Remember, we're talking about how great a salvation that we have. And so what he's trying to say is, listen, you do need saving. Things are not as they're supposed to be. They are definitely not as they're supposed to be. We can look at it one of two ways. We can either look at all of the horrible things that are going on in this world. We can just put on the news and watch the wars and the destruction and the devastation and the starvation and the fires and the droughts and the floodings and everything that is going on. We can look at all of those things and we can say, you're right, we don't see us having any power or authority. Or you could flip it and say, look at how far we've come. We put people on the moon. We can go to we can't really go to the deepest depths of the ocean, but we've seen most of it. We can do remarkable things. We now walk around with more information than any one person has ever had in their entire life in the palm of your hand. You can communicate with somebody across the world in the blink of an eye. I can have a video conference with somebody on the other side of the planet. I do marriage counseling for people in Switzerland. That's crazy. It's premarital counseling. I'm going to go do the wedding later on. Yeah, I know. But what we can do and what we have accomplished is amazing. We can sit back. This is fantastic. But not everything is subject to us. We still die. The richest person on earth still die. The doctors still die. The lawyers still die. The still die. The poor still die. There are things that we have not been able to escape. And that's what he's telling them. He's trying to put everything into perspective. And he's saying, listen, this is how God created it. And this is where we're at. We're at a spot where creation is not what it's supposed to be. We are not living the way we're supposed to be living. It is not supposed to be a place filled with pain. It's not supposed to be a place filled with disease. It's not supposed to be a place filled with loss. It's not supposed to be that. So you do need a Savior, because can any of you stop any of that? And that's what he's saying. You've been given authority. This is how it's supposed to be, but none of you can stop any of it. None of you can stop what is inevitably coming for each one of us. None of us can stop it. So he's sitting saying, we don't see these things, and I love how he phrases it. He says, and we don't see these things. We don't see everything subject to us, but we see Jesus. And I love that phrase. I love that flip. He says, but we see Jesus. This is who we see. So you have all of these people who are leaving the church at that time because of the persecution, and they were looking for something else that was going to bring them salvation. He says, we have such a great salvation. All of those people, no matter what religion you go to, no matter where you go, they're all going to die. They still cannot escape the realities of the sin in our lives. The death, the disease, the sickness. You can't escape any of it. He says, but we see Jesus. Where are his eyes? On Jesus. Where are our eyes most of the time? On the weeds. On the things that are in our lives that really don't matter. That really don't make a difference. And so he's saying you've got to pay attention. You've got to pay the most careful attention so that you don't drift away to this incredible salvation that you have. And what you need to understand is that no matter how great things are, you can't escape death. But we see Jesus. And listen to how he describes him. But we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels for a little while, now crowned with glory and honor because he suffered death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. And so he's introducing a couple themes that we're going to be talking about down the road. One of them is that he is saying that Jesus has come and he is crowned with glory. That Jesus came, that we have our eyes fixed on him. And if we have our eyes fixed on him, what we see is that he was made a little lower than the angels. He is the one that, as we're looking at Psalm 8, we don't have Psalm 8, Jesus does. And because Jesus does, we're going to see next week, because Jesus has it, it's ours. And that's where he's going. And I don't want to ruin what we're going to be doing next week, but that's where he's going with this. He's saying, no, but all of this that you see that you don't have, Jesus has it. And because Jesus has it, it's ours. He was made a little lower than the angels. And so he's going to define and describe next week how Jesus made it possible that we get what he has. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week. That's the really good news. So his good news is ramping up. He's saying, listen, if you're going to be intentional about something, be intentional about your relationship with Christ. Because he has offered us such a great salvation. And this salvation is ours. Not because we see it right here, but because we see Jesus. And we see Jesus, and how do we see him? We see him in what he's introducing. We see him as human. He came to be with us. Next week, we're going to talk about all that means. Well, not all that means. That would take a year and a half. We're going to talk about what that means. Then he introduces the next part where he says, but he is crowned with glory. And he's crowned with glory because he suffered and died. That's going to be another subject that he's going to be talking. And he says, He died, and that death he tasted for every one of us so that we don't have to. So not only do you have a great salvation that conquers death for you, that's where we stand, and we're always like, okay, that's great. Here's my get out of hell free card. That's a huge part of what Jesus came to do. But he's crowned with glory. Do you know you were created to be crowned with glory? Do you live your life as if you are crowned with glory? No. Not until I run a sub 5-minute mile does anybody even talk about me. That I just don't have inherent worth because God put it. And so these are all the subjects that we're going to cover. And he's saying, listen, what we're going to be doing for the rest of Hebrews is talking about the great salvation that we have. That is not just that, oh, Jesus died on the cross for your sin. Okay, we're good? We're good. Can we go home? Sure, because I got to get back to the things that I need to do. I got to go watch the Flyers lose and the Sixers lose. You know, rough days. And so we sit back and we look at this and we say, do I really know what I have? Do you have any idea what you have in Jesus Christ? I will tell you, you haven't even scratched the surface of it. And that's what he's saying here. He's saying you haven't scratched the surface of being in a relationship with Jesus Christ. If you're willing to walk away, it's because you've allowed the weeds to grow and you have not paid very careful attention to what he has been saying. Because what he is saying has brought to us the greatest salvation ever known. And so this is what we have. This is what is yours. And he's saying, let's keep going so we know what we have. My goal today is to make you thirsty to know what you have in Jesus. What do you have in him? Because if you don't know what you have in him, you're going to keep failing at being intentional in your relationship with him. Church and Jesus will be an add-on to your life. He will be something that you have collected and put on your shelf. How many of us live that way? You walk into the house and say, this is Jesus. I got him back in the early 2000s. He's hanging on my wall. Well, let's keep going. Let me show you what else I have. Jesus is not an add-on. Jesus is not an accessory that we wear. Jesus is the air we breathe. He is so much more than that. If you are not being intentional in your relationship with God, I will tell you it's because you don't understand the great salvation. So now it's time to dig in. Okay, what is this great salvation? And that great salvation is going to be that Jesus became man. That is a huge piece of all of this. We're going to talk about that now. That you are crowned with glory. That you get to be the image bearer of God. That Jesus conquered death and sin so it no longer has reign over you. Either one. Wow. That is a great salvation. Yet, we take it. We don't know what we really need. That's what I'm going to be praying over the next month and change. That God would just open our eyes, see what we truly need salvation from. Why do I need it? That's what we've studied here and seen here in chapter 2. We're going to get into the rest of chapter 2, which is going to talk to us about who Jesus is as a man. We talked about who he was as God. Now we get to see him as a man next week. Come, grab your friends, join in. Let's go through this. Let's discover the incredible salvation God has. So please, be intentional about your relationship. The only way to be intentional is if you want it. Start praying and asking God that he gives you more of a passion. And as he gives you more of a passion for him, you're going to be able to start seeing the great salvation he has. We serve an incredible God, not just an add-on God. Pray. Our gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, please forgive us, for you have created us, you have saved us, sustained us. We pretend like you're an accessory. We pull out every once in a while. Father, I pray you would be everything in our lives. Lord, that a Sunday morning isn't just time to come and to check off a box, but to come so we can worship our God, that we can see you more clearly than we've ever seen you, that we could draw closer in relationship with you. Father, I thank you for the gift of grace you have given us, that you tasted death for us. May we be able to see that. Give us a passion for you. In Jesus' name I pray. Worship team, would you come forward?